What does it mean to live a resilient life? I'm Ryan Manion. I lost my brother to war and my mom to cancer, and I've learned a lot about myself along the way. Now, as the CEO of Travis Manion Foundation, I'm on a journey to explore what it means to be resilient against life's many challenges. Join me and some incredible guests as we ask ourselves the hard questions and define what it means to struggle well. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. I am here with Dave Berke, and Dave, we were trying to figure out if we had actually ever met because I feel like I know you. I know a lot about you. I obviously see all the things you do with Echelon Front, but you have a new book coming out, The Need to Lead. I got a chance. I finished it last night. It's a great book, a great evolution of all of the leadership lessons and principles you teach at Echelon Front. So super excited, everybody, to pick this up and read this. But welcome to the Resilient Life.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I was thinking too, had we met or not, we obviously run in the same circles, and I did feel like we had met before, and I think we realized this is probably the first time.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to meet in person. We're gonna have to get you out to an Army Navy game. You know, that's where you need to show up there.
100%.
Yeah. So we've had Jocko and Leif coming for the last several years, and I think I introduced. I believe that, if I'm correct, I believe that when Jocko came to the game, that was actually his first Army Navy game. The first time I brought him.
Well, I would love to come because it would be mine as well.
Oh, wow. Well, then you got to come. You got to come.
Totally.
So awesome. Well, so I want to back up, and I'm going to start with my favorite part of your book. You teach a tremendous amount of leadership principles in here, practical application. It's super easy to read and understand, and it was great reminders for me. But there was something right in the beginning of the book where I highlighted it, I underlined it, and I was like, I love this so much. It was you talking about you wanted to become a Top Gun pilot after watching Top Gun. So, and so funny because, when the new Top Gun came out, there were recruiters at movie theaters. Like literally they know the power of these films, which is wild. So you were first generation Top Gun. You saw that movie. You're 13 years old, right?
14, yeah.
14, you see that movie and you start telling your mom that this is what you want to do. And her response to you was, someone has to do it. It might as well be you.
Yeah. Well, that stuck with me. Yeah, that stuck with me.
It stuck with me. I read that and I was like, that's so brilliant, right? Because you talk to your kids about their dreams and what they want to do and how they can achieve them. But your mom just made it so simple. Like, well, someone has to do it. Why can't it? It should be you, Yeah. I loved it.
That quote at the time demystified all these things. Like I'd look at someone in an airplane and think they were like a robot or something, not a real person.
Yeah.
When I talked to her about wanting to do that, that was her way of saying like, hey, like those are just regular people. Every job out there is done by just some regular, normal person.
Yeah.
So if someone's going to do it, it might as well be you. And that changed my mentality, course of my life. And that's a saying that I have recycled many, many times in my life, all based on the one thing I could picture where I was standing in her doorway. Like I can picture that moment extremely well. It was a powerful moment. I'm glad that resonated because that's something that has stuck with me my whole life.
I mean, it resonated so much with me. I was like, I need my kids to tell me they want to do something immediately so I can just be like, someone's got to do it. Might as well be you. But you bring it back at the end in talking about leadership. You say, I often think back to my mom's response to my childhood dream, but now I know it needs to go a step farther. Someone has to lead and it needs to be you. And then you kind of kick off into everything. But I loved how you opened the book that way. It was super powerful. And yeah, man, I love when I get little nuggets of wisdom and goodness in books that I can take with me. So excited to apply that one to my parenting style going forward. Yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you. That's
Um,
awesome.
so obviously you're first drawn to the Marine Corps because you see Top Gun, like Marine Corps and aviation. This is what I want to do. Let's just talk a little briefly. You end up becoming a Top Gun pilot. Like, I mean, your dream achieved, which is amazing. Tell us a
Crazy.
little bit about that journey because, again, you're standing in the doorway. Your mom said someone has to do it. Might as well be you. And next thing you know, it is you. Like, what did
Yeah.
that journey look like for you?
It was it's interesting because so I grew up no military family, no experience in the military, no role models. I'm no military in my history. But I lived near a Marine base just randomly. Like when I was 5, my parents moved to a town called El Toro. There was a Marine base there, and you understand this. Once the Marine Corps gets into your bloodstream, like that's it. You're just
Yes.
infected with the need. So the thought of being a Marine at a young age really came from just seeing Marines just like they're just kind of larger than life characters. Then about 14, I see the movie, and I'd always been fascinated with planes. I just thought they were really neat. I see planes landing on boats, and very shortly after, I make the connection. I'm not sure if somebody explained it or I learned about it, whatever it was. I read a book or something. Marines land jets on boats, and I'm like, all right, that's it. Like
Yeah.
14, you're like, that's it. I want to be a Marine that lands planes on boats. And I know how silly that sounds, but in 14, like that's, you could turn that into like, that's like Star Wars. It's like this crazy thing.
Yeah.
Well, I got some good advice. My mom gave me some good advice. Hey, you can do this. And then you start just you asking questions and you go to like, the career center in high school. You talk to another Marine and all of a sudden what happens at the time is they just lay out the path of how it works. And it works like anything else. You got to figure out what the requirements are. You got to sign the paperwork. You got to do the physical fitness tests. You got to do the pull-ups and all the things. And there's nothing really crazy about them. They can be a little bit challenging, but I was smart enough to know that someone else knew how to do this. And I asked a lot of questions, got a lot of information, and discovered there was a path to doing this. And I just got on that path. And there's the basic school. There's before that, there's offshore candidate school. There's the basic school. There's flight school. There's all these wickets along the way, and each one basically just has this criteria you have to learn. And if you do well enough, you keep moving along. And that's kind of what I did.
Yeah. I love that. It's funny. My daughter's a youngster at the Naval Academy, and
It's
you
so
know,
cool.
she knew kind of like again the same thing, like the wickets for what she had to achieve to get there. And it's like you put that into practice and it's like, all right, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. And when she was leading up to plebe summer, somebody gave her the advice of like just know how to do 1,000 push-ups, because if you can't answer a question, they're going to make you do push-ups. And so all summer leading up to going to plebe summer, she was just doing push-ups to the point where my dad, a retired Marine Corps colonel who literally, I mean, tells people to do push-ups all day, every day, said to her, I think you're doing too many push-ups. And she's like, Pop, I'm not. And that, when she got out of plebe summer, she said, the best thing I did was those push-ups, because if I didn't know an answer, they dropped you. And she said, and so when everyone else was struggling, I could just keep going for hours. I was like, I'm just going to stay down here and keep doing my push-ups. So
Smart
yeah,
kid. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's so
Um,
cool.
so you make it, you follow that line, you go to the basic school or OCS, you go to the basic school, you continue to want to do aviation.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about how you became, I mean, you went from wanting to fly, so that's one thing, but then you're training at Top Gun. Like that's here. So what did that look like for you?
Well, in some sense, like, these cliches about how things happen in life, and, it's this intersection of timing, opportunity, and preparation. And I think all that is true is a lot of random things have to work out in your favor. Timing, availability, circumstances beyond your control. A lot of those things have to line up. And so throughout my career, when I applied to be a Marine officer, there was no air contracts available. So I signed up to be a ground officer. So I go to the basic school as a ground guy, and there's only 2 air slots available. And so you got to finish really close to the top of your class and do well. And I was lucky enough, I get the second of the 2 air slots. And so there's an opportunity, a pretty narrow one, but I'm prepared for it. And then I get to flight school, and flight school is like anything. Is there's a performance cut that if you want to fly jets, you have to be towards the top, and each along the way there's a little wickets, and the wickets just get narrow and narrower to get selected to be a Marine, to get selected to go to flight school, to get selected for jets, to get selected for F-18s, to get selected for a single seat carrier F-18s, then to get selected to go to Top Gun. There's nothing like magical about any of those things, but each one represents an opportunity that has to present itself that you can't control. I don't decide how many billets there are for aviation. I don't decide when my squadron gets a Top Gun billet. But when those opportunities were there, I had always had the thought of wanting to be prepared, because it's what I really wanted. Secretly, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a Top Gun instructor, just like in the movies. When the opportunity did present itself, which is something beyond my control, one thing I learned to do is be really proactive in terms of being prepared that if it did show up, I would be considered as one of the qualified people for that job. And that's the preparation meeting the opportunity is, it always helps to be doing well. It always helps to be prepared. It always helps to be ranked towards the top. It always helps to do 1,000 push-ups before you show up. Yeah. So when the time comes to do the push-ups, you're prepared for that. And so I love the story about your daughter, and I think it's just a good mindset for life. And that's really how I ended up in this ever narrowing band. I go to Top Gun as a student. I graduate. September 11th happens. I get invited back to be an instructor, and all these things happen. So I end up being, as a Marine, the senior instructor at Top Gun, being dual qualified in F-18s and F-16s, which is way beyond anything you could ever dream of. Yeah. It's also something you can't control. But as each of those opportunities became available, I was prepared at that time to take advantage of it. And that's, again, just a smart way to live. And I think your daughter's story is brilliant. It seems it's not that complicated, right? Yeah. Like, okay, think about what you might need to do, be prepared for when the time comes. And you know what? We don't always get those opportunities. Right. Life happens, and you know that. Yeah. But you're gonna get opportunities in life, and you want to be prepared to take advantage of those. You don't want to look back with a regret saying, I wish I had done more push-ups or whatever. So I set myself up with that mindset, and it served me well throughout my career.
Preparation meets opportunity. I love that. So, okay, let's talk about how you prepared, because I'm always fascinated by, you did what, 23 years in the Marine Corps? Is that correct? So yeah, 23 years in the Marine Corps. How were you preparing to transition out of the Marine Corps?
Yeah, that's a good question, because to be quite honest, that's why you're kind of calling me out, because that's one thing I didn't really think about. It's kind of a crazy story.
That's not uncommon. That's not uncommon.
No, it's not. Yeah. Well, your dad might like this story, because he would know, and you might know this, like 23 years is a weird time to get out.
It is.
Most people get out as a lieutenant colonel with 20 years or a colonel with 26 years. That's like, it's all this retirement stuff. Anyway, I don't want to go into those details, but I love being a Marine. I got married. My wife was very comfortable with either staying or getting out. There was no like pressure in any direction. I had done all these really fun, unique, exciting things. I flew the F-22 as a Marine, F-35s, Johns Hopkins, like in Ramadi with the SEALs. Like, so I had all these things in my career, looking back, like, I can't believe I got to do all these crazy things. So I was at the Pentagon. I had been selected for colonel. I had been selected for command. I was going to go back to be the CO, commanding officer, as a colonel, back to flying F-35s. And everything was like lining up to continue in my career. And I had this moment and I was talking to my wife. I can picture it as like, I felt like for the first time in my 23-year career, I was going to go back to do something that I kind of felt I'd already done. I wasn't as excited. I could feel myself not having that same passion and just innate desire. And I understood, it's like, it's not a good idea to climb up the ladder of an F-35 and not feel really excited about it. Every flight I'd ever taken, everything I'd ever done to that point in my career, I was like, I wanted to be doing that more than anything. And I understood, like, I'm about to go to do this again. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel that same feeling inside. Yeah. So on the same day, I declined command for F-35s. I declined promotion to colonel, and I submitted for my retirement on the same day. And I just sent these three different forms and kind of took myself and took people by surprise. I was about to pin on Colonel, which was going to be another 3-year obligation. I was going to, stay on that path. And on that day, as I'm leaving the Pentagon on the bus from the Pentagon to the parking lot, I get a phone call from Leif Babin, who I'd stayed in touch with, good friend. We were in Ramadi together. I'd known him. And he goes, hey, man, I know we'd been talking, and he'd talked to me about Echelon Front. He talked to me about the book. Well, they had done extremely well. The company was starting to grow. The book was starting to really take root. This is 2016, if you can picture it, as shortly after the book came out. And he's like, hey, Jocko and I would love to have you. It was just the two of them at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't have anything right now planned, because I literally that day had decided to leave the Marine Corps and I had no plans. I didn't have another job lined up. I didn't have a career path. I left.
There was no preparation.
None. Zero. And so my point to that is, don't do what I did, because it's uncommon to get a call from the Leifs of the world going, hey, come join our company, which has gone on to be like the most incredible experience ever. But I'm probably the worst role model, other than I did find myself in a place where the things that I had learned, the experience that I had, I could find meaning and value in them in another job that I never envisioned. And I think the best part of that is what I had done in the previous 23 years was relevant to what we were going to do. It didn't have to be the same. I wasn't flying airplanes, obviously, but the things I cared about, I could find value by contributing to those lessons to help other people. And it's been very lucky. But again, I cannot take credit for that. The timing of that was clearly beyond my control.
Yeah. Well, listen, you got a great opportunity, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you've been at Echelon Front for quite a bit now. You're the chief development officer there. But what inspired you to write this book? Like, at this time, obviously, you've got so much going on with Echelon Front. Like, what is the decision for you to say, you know what, I want to put this down on paper. I want to write something.
Yeah, I won't lie. And anybody that's ever written a book, and I know you understand this, I did not want to write a book. I had no interest in writing a book. Not just because there's, I guess, two main reasons. One is I didn't, for a while, really think I had much to contribute. If you look in the backdrop of what Leif and Jocko had written with Extreme Ownership, Dichotomy Leadership, Leadership Strategy and Tactics, I'm like, oh, everything we teach has already been written. I also came to discover I'm not a great writer, not naturally. But Jocko was like, hey, man, listen, I want you to think about writing this book. And what I realized as I thought about it was there was a lot that we hadn't written down. And so my first thought of like, oh, I don't need to write it, actually wasn't accurate. And he made a comment to me, not too different from a comment that my mom had made, was something along the lines of, hey, if there's something you have that you've experienced that you can capture or codify or explain or teach or pass on to someone else to make their life better, you have a moral obligation to do it. It is a mortal sin for you to not do that. And the way he said it was like, if you want to reach your full potential as a human being, which is our job, you have an obligation to do this. And when he said it like that, it wasn't like forcing me or making me do it. It was making me realize I had a responsibility to do it. And then as I started thinking, I'm like, okay, there's plenty of lessons in here that we haven't captured or explained. And if I do it well, someone else's life will improve. And that set me down on the path. I didn't just pick up a computer or a pen and paper, right? It took forever. It was brutal, but it was really driven by his helping me understand, I hate to say it, like the obligation I had to do this. It was for me to do the right thing was to write this book. So I wrote the book.
That sounds like a pretty typical Jocko response. Yeah. Like, it's a mortal sin for you to not write this book.
Totally.
But
the dude has written like 9 books or whatever, and he's like, oh, just write a book. Like, it's all so easy in his head.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, it'll be 3rd in the series after Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy. I'm like, oh, perfect. We'll just compare my book to those books, right?
Well, and you know what? Listen, I actually did, as I read this, I did compare it to those books, and I agree with what Jocko had to say. Like, Extreme Ownership, know it, love it, we get it, the dichotomy of leadership, the way they break that down. But what you add and the value that this book adds is this idea that every problem, like you say, every problem is a leadership problem. Yeah. And and you're able to explain that through your own personal stories, in the Marine Corps. And I loved how you do the snippets of clients that you work with
Yeah.
and sharing their stories. I thought that was brilliant. So I think it actually is the perfect trifecta to this group of books. And I think it's going to be obviously very well received. And for me, when I look at extreme ownership and the dichotomy of leadership and then this, like, the idea for me as a woman, as a working professional, as a mother, like, the idea that every problem is a leadership problem, these principles are much more applicable to my life. So thank you for writing it. I really really enjoyed it.
Whole process.
So let's talk a little bit about this idea. Every problem is a leadership problem. Like, how did you come to that belief? I mean, it seems so simplistic. And when you put it in, I'm like, yeah, no shit. Every problem is a leadership problem. But I'd never thought about it that way before.
Well, it's something I had to learn to understand it. It's really derived from the lessons that we learned at Echelon Front, and really the origins of the concept of ownership is, I think our instincts typically is to look around at whatever challenges we're dealing with and attribute it to, our goal is to attribute to things beyond our control so we don't have to take responsibility for it. You know, if, it could be the economy or whatever. You could just, it's very easy to find external factors. And certainly I could find other people that are the root cause. And we all know at this point, when you do that, the problems just get worse. Things don't get solved. It doesn't help you. But that's not just true in business. And obviously, our company, we are a leadership consultancy. We teach the skills of leadership to companies for the most part. But over time, we started to recognize that a lot of the questions clients would ask, they go, hey, I love this. It's really doing great with my team. Can I ask you a question? When I leave the workplace and I get home, for some reason, I walk in my front door and things tend to fall apart.
Yeah.
And, Jocko really deserves the credit for this, when we're talking about it conceptually, but over time, we came to understand not only does it apply in all aspects of your life, with your family, with your community, certainly just you as an individual, that might be the most powerful place where it does apply. And you can't help but over time recognize whatever you're dealing with, your company is not, generating revenue. You and your wife aren't aligned on how to raise the kids. Your children are not listening to you. Whatever it is, it's all the same stuff. These are all leadership problems. And it's super, super helpful to get past the whole, how do I point the finger and place blame and externalize that and go, no, this is me, this is us, this is a leadership problem. And the beautiful thing about just embracing that every problem is a leadership problem means that you now have the solution, because the solution is leadership. And it is such a great way to go through life, which is, it's not my kid's stubborn or my wife disagrees with me. It's, I'm not doing something correctly to get the outcome that I want. I need to do a better job communicating, better job listening, whatever it might be. That stuff applies everywhere, and it makes life a lot better. And so it really simplifies how do you look at things. Just look at them as a leadership problem. Everything is a leadership problem, which means the solution is leadership. And it's just a great way to live, because it makes all the problems in your life solvable.
Yeah. Well, you talk a lot about their communication, which is always a big issue with everything in life. And it was a great reminder for me, because you talked about the effective way, and I want to make sure I say this right, but effective communication is also effective listening. Yeah. And you gave this example of, you're out at dinner, if your plate still has all the food on it, like, maybe you're not listening enough. And I'm a big personality, and I often find that I maybe am the one that still has a lot of food. And I highlighted that, and I was like, next time I go out, my food's going to be finished before anybody else. Like, I want to make sure that I'm actively listening. And, you take that back. Again, I'm looking at a lot of this as like how I work with my kids. Like, how am I listening and showing up for my kids? And not just listening, but hearing what they're saying. And that's where, this idea of communication becomes a lot more palatable if you're listening to what they're actually saying.
Yeah, well, I'm laughing as you're talking about it. Big personality, maybe a lot to say. The chapter that I wrote about in there was a little bit of some self-diagnosis of, I had fallen into the trap throughout my entire career where I was the one talking all the time.
Yeah.
And I had all these, and I explained it. These are all excuses I made for myself. You know, when you're flying in an airplane by yourself, you're the primary talker. Like, you're the one that talks. When you're the instructor at Top Gun, it stands to reason you are doing the talking. When I was in a Humvee, you know, in ground combat, leading my Marines, and the one talking airplanes, I'm the talker. And all of a sudden, I had built this habit by which I was the talker. And it's not my most favorite story to tell, but I came home from Iraq, and obviously, you know, it was a tough deployment, and a lot of things had gone on there. And you probably remember this from the book. There's a scene, you know, we're driving home, and I'm yelling at my wife for talking too much. It's a very, it's a tough story to tell, and there's some context that, you know, people will get when they read it. But I had lost focus or context on the idea that, like, the best way to communicate is to just listen to other people. And I had completely lost sight of that. And I was the primary talker in all aspects of my life. And then it bled over into my brand new marriage, to the point that I was, like, I think really the one deciding when and how everybody else spoke. And, you know, my wife, we had just gotten married. I was a Top Gun when we met. It was a very different environment. Now I'm back from Iraq. I'd lost a Marine. It was a tough deployment. And she was very much wanted to support me, be differential, and just help me. And what happened over time was, like, I was the communicator in the relationship. And I realized one day, like, this is a disaster. I've created a untenable environment. And I hate to say it, the answer was very, very simple. Just stop talking and listen. And that simple understanding in my brain changed everything about my life, to include my marriage. And it was just understood how overlooked that attribute is. Just listen. And there's a long story in there, and obviously there's more to it than that. But this book, that was a very humbling chapter to write, because I had to admit that I had really formed a very firm, solid, bad habit of, I'm the primary communicator. And it's not a good way to be.
I suffer from that ailment as well. So, yeah.
We're in good company.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, I'd love to know, when you look at it, like, I always like to break things down. Like, so how can they take this book or the principles that you guys execute at Echelon Front? Like, what is one principle that individuals, whether they're veterans, leaders, young adults, how can they begin applying a leadership framework, right? Even in a small way, each and every day.
And in that book, you know, we wrote the book, that format of, I tell a story. And sometimes it's a combat story, sometimes it's a Top Gun story, it's a family story. I talked about, there's stories about my kids. There's a story in there. There's a little lesson that sits inside that. What's the takeaway from that? And then there's an application, which is, as you know, somewhat business centric. And as I wrote that, we started to put together like a training guide, which eventually is now like its own separate book. Book's the wrong word, but like a companion guide, which essentially has the 10 chapters, and we put some training around it so you could, you know, with your company have like a chapter a week or whatever, do that. My point to that is I understood in writing it that there was a training and a leadership lessons component to it. And I think the start for me is something that I think anyone that's thinking about, you know, how would I learn this, is, I think, start with the concept, and I talk a little bit about it, is that leadership is a skill. And that is, I think, a really hard thing for people to grasp, especially early on, is that they look at other people and go, oh, that's a good leader. I want to emulate that person. That's a good role model. And they somehow place them on a pedestal as if, like, they were born with those abilities to be a good leader, or they just naturally bestowed upon them. They just have this gift of leadership. Well, you and I both know that's not true. I mean, there's some people have a little bit of natural talent inside that. But if you're looking at someone who's a good leader, they learned those skills. They learned them, whether it's at the Naval Academy or literally anywhere. And so I wrote the book with the idea that you can, if you want to be a better leader, you can learn those skills. Yeah. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, you're going to be the best leader in the world, just like with athletes and musicians or any other skill. But everyone that practices the skill of leadership gets better. And so I wrote the book with that very much in mind. And even the workbook has that design as, you can start in any arena that you want, your work life, your personal life, your community life, and maybe sometimes just you individually as a person. If you want to be a better leader, you can. It's a skill no different from any other skill in the world. You want to learn to play a guitar? You can buy a guitar, take guitar lessons, and you will get better at the guitar. That's true for everything. And if you start with the mentality that leadership is a skill that I can learn, not some sort of thing that's bestowed upon me from birth or by title, then all of a sudden, as you read these chapters, you go, oh, that applies to me. Or like you said, maybe that listening, we go, oh, I kind of do that. Maybe.
Yeah.
And if you apply the lesson, you'll listen more and talk less, you'll become a better leader. And that's true for all things. And so I wrote it like that with the intent. And overarching is, if you believe that leadership is a skill, which we know it is, that means you can learn it and you can get better.
I love it. So we talk a lot on the show about resilience and overcoming adversity. And I'd love to know, and if you've even thought about this, like, how does leadership show up in resilience?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And, I have this life where, I was a Marine and a Marine in combat, and I dealt with some real challenges. Losing a Marine is certainly the hardest thing I ever endured as a Marine. But I also have been it's interesting to describe it. I'm very fortunate to be around people that have endured oftentimes much harder things than me and have found a way to be successful in their life, not despite that, but as a result of that. And I'm talking to someone who I know understands that better than anyone. And what I discovered was the common thread amongst all the people that have this incredible adversity that is presented to them, that they can't control, by the way, that is presented to them, the resilience that comes from that, if you describe the things they do, it sounds very, very similar. You take responsibility for it. You take control of your actions. You set a disciplined framework for how you're going to respond to it, deal with it, grow from it. You think about how what you learned can help other people, whether it's your kids, your family members, your community, whatever. And all of a sudden you look at all the different attributes that people apply that survive and thrive in these difficult environments and demonstrate their resiliency to be successful. And all of a sudden, it looks almost exactly the same as the things that make you an effective leader. And they're Ryan, they're synonyms. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And so when you take these incredibly difficult things that happen to us in life, and we all are going to have those to a certain degree, there is a way to respond to that. And I think the word resiliency, I don't know if there's a better word out there. The things you need to do that apply to all aspects of your life. And if you do it really, really well, the byproduct that will be is the people around you will be the beneficiaries of that. And I think for those of us, and I think you understand this better than anyone, there's a lot of power in that because it keeps the memory alive of the person we might have lost. It keeps the spirit of that person that helped us with that alive. And that's all we're really ever trying to do. And all of a sudden that can be beneficial to the people around us. That's not just leadership, that's resiliency. It's the same thing. So that's how I see it. I love the question. That's kind of my mentality on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, a lot of times when I'm talking about resiliency and being resilient, like, I talk about it as a skill as well. I'm like, you don't just wake up and say, oh, that's a resilient person. Like, that person actively chose to be resilient. Like, they worked on being resilient. So
100%.
Yeah, a lot of the same principles. All right, we're going to do some rapid fire questions. Okay. They're going to be a little all over the place. All right. What is a book other than your own that has profoundly changed how you think about leadership? And it can't be Jocko's and Leif's books either.
Oh man, I was gonna say how cliche that sound. I read a book. I can't say, I'm not allowed to say extreme ownership as what you're telling me, because
that's correct.
I have to at least say I was gonna say that. So when Jocko,
okay, there you go.
You got the answer right. When I was a kid, I read a book called The Great Santini. And it's a really well-known book in sort of the Marine Corps aviation. It's a young boy whose dad was a Marine fighter pilot. And the irony in that is I read it as a kid because it was super fascinating about flying airplanes. But as I read it again as I got older, and it was kind of a case study in leadership. And there's a character in there called the Great Santini who's kind of patently just like a really bad dad. But inside that, the author writes the story. I found out that it was really a very true story in his life about what it was like to grow up with a Marine colonel, fighter pilot as a dad. And I took a bunch of lessons there that I told myself if that ever was me, how I would treat my kids and how I would treat the people around me. And I know that sounds kind of silly because it's a quasi-fiction book, although it's very much about this author's life. That book, and I've read that book, I can't tell you how many times. It started as a book about Marine fighter jets and ended up becoming like not a parenting book, but kind of like a leadership parenting book. And that book to me is always sad and something I've thought about. It influenced a million aspects of my life, to include what kind of dad that I am to my kids as a former Marine, So
Yeah.
anyway,
All right.
Santini.
I'm certainly going to have to read that now. So yes.
You will, and your dad, if your dad hasn't read it, The Great Santini, you will 100% appreciate that book.
I love it. I'm going to buy it for him as well. What daily routine or practice do you credit most for helping you stay grounded as a leader?
Is being married an answer?
Sure. Yeah.
I wrote that chapter about my wife, and I when I say learning to listen to the people around you, I'm dead serious. And so I think there was a point where I recognized, like, anytime that there's friction or conflict in my life with my wife and our kids stuff, it is almost always attributed to how I'm acting or reacting to the situation. And the daily practice I get up when my wife and I are talking on the regular about what's going on in our family with our 3 kids in our lives, I am constantly telling myself, talk less, listen more. That is a discipline like exercise and eating. I'm telling you, Ryan, it is something I will have to tell myself that. And it is no different than the alarm goes off, you get up, you go exercise like we did this morning. That is something, and I'm not perfect at it. I don't want to make it sound like I've mastered that art, but that is a practice that I put in on a daily basis, and I mean that on a regular basis. I tell myself, talk less, listen more, and it's remarkable the impact that that's had on my life, and I've been doing that for quite some time. That's an important thing, and I'll just offer this. I know it's a long-winded answer.
Yeah.
I do those with my kids too. My kids have problems. I got 2 teenage girls in high school. I got a middle school boy. The things in their lives are like level 10 problems, and part of me is like, those problems are ridiculous, you don't even know. And I'm like, nope, stop, just listen to what they had to say. It serves me extremely well.
Yeah. It's very easy to be like, you have no idea, kid.
Exactly.
You don't, but I fall victim to that too, and I actively try to work on that.
Yep.
What is one mistake you made early in your career that you now view as an essential lesson in your life?
Just one?
Just one. Just pick one of your favorites.
Well, you can take that book, pick any of the 10 chapters. I think the one for me early in my career, that I wrote the chapter on humility. There was a part in me that as I got into the Marine Corps very early on, my very first job in the basic school, learning to be a Marine officer, I got it in my head that if I was good at something and you weren't as good as me, you were a problem. And instead of seeing people around me that might have been struggling a little bit or underperforming a little bit, instead of looking at them as if they needed help, I looked at them with judgment as if they weren't good enough. Okay. And that really became a problem for me. My ego got out of control. My relationships fell apart. The people around me didn't like me, didn't want to be around me. I wrote about this. Again, it's very humbling to write this story. But the lesson that I learned, and thank God it was given to me by my leadership at the basic school early on, and I could start to apply it, was if the people around you aren't doing well, what they need is your help. Yeah. They don't need your judgment. They don't need your criticism. They don't need you reminding them that you did better on that test or faster on that run. They need your help. Yeah. And just the simple attribute of the people around you, what they need from you is they need your leadership, they need your support, they need your help, is such a much better way to go through life. It really is around the concept of being humble, but it was really my natural tendency to really be critical. 21-year-old Dave Berke, if you didn't do as well as him, he was critical of you, not helpful. And I had to learn the hard way that was a really bad way to think and live. And I've spent 30 plus years trying to get better at that, and I have to some degree, but that was a very painful, very hard lesson learned very early on in my career.
I love that. What's a leadership myth you wish people would stop believing?
Yeah, we've kind of talked to it. I think the biggest myth is that leadership is granted to you. In the professional world, it's super obvious, like, oh, you're the supervisor now, you're a leader. Oh, you're the manager, you're a leader. Oh, that guy's the CEO, he's a leader. And it's the truth is, like, every single human being is a leader. So and the myth is that
go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the myth is that it doesn't apply to all of us.
Yeah.
And the truth is it does. Every single human being is a leader.
So I'll tell you, the when I first started our character program, where we have veterans talking to youth across the country, and the first thing that I ever did was I spoke at my brother's high school. And I tell this story because they asked me to come and speak about Travis. And so the whole time I was like putting the presentation together, I could like hear Travis in my head saying, "Stop talking about me." So I tried to like add in other examples, and I wanted to add in other examples of leadership. So my leadership example was George Washington, and perhaps his greatest act of leadership was retiring back to Mount Vernon to let others lead. And, you know, I was trying to express to the kids, like, you don't need a title or a position to be a leader, right? And I always joke, so I gave it and I read it to my dad. I did my presentation and my dad said, "Oh, that's great. And God, I love that George Washington example. What a great example." And I presented it. And afterwards, the principal, I said, "Get feedback from the kids. I want to know what they thought." And he came back and he's like, "Listen, obviously a few days later, they loved hearing about Travis." I told some stories about other Marines Travis served with that did come back. I said, "Anything they didn't like?" He's like, "You know, they didn't love that George Washington story." I was like, but it wasn't because of what the story was. It was more that like these kids were looking for relevant and relatable models. But I always laugh when I hear, you know, you don't need a title or position to be a leader. And I always think back to my George Washington story because I thought it was so brilliant at the time. Yeah. If you could go back to your first day as a Marine, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I guess I kind of gave that one away just a minute ago.
Yeah.
I would tell myself, you know, the short answer is like, be humble.
Yeah.
What I would actually tell myself is your ego is going to become a problem for you throughout your career. And we are huge believers in humility. We teach that it's the most important attribute in a leader. And the reason we teach it is that it's a problem for all of us. It is a long road to get control over your ego. And I don't think most people, if anyone, ever fully does.
Yeah.
And so I think the lesson is, it isn't just to be humble. Of course, that's true. Isn't just to listen. All those things are all true. It's your ego will be a problem for you forever. And so you always have to be on guard for that. If you ever get to a place where like, "Oh, Ryan, I am in full control over my ego. I am fully humble as a human being," you're about to run into a brick wall.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen like that. And so the lesson is your ego will be a problem for you forever. Just be prepared for it. Would have helped me a lot.
Okay. Favorite military movie? And you can't say Top Gun because we know
that's the cliched answer. Man, there's a ton that I really like. I don't know if this is a great answer or not, but I'm going to say it. I just watched the movie Warfare.
Yeah. I didn't
And
see
the
it.
reason I have never seen something more realistic and accurate. It's probably not a movie for the masses like Top Gun is. There's no pop culture in there. It's done a certain way, but I will tell you, having been in the Battle of Ramadi in 2006, alongside Leif's and Jocko's SEALs, and to see that movie, there were times like I did not know how they were filming it. I honestly, it was like they had a cameraman where we were. It was as authentic as anything I'd ever seen and extremely powerful. I watched it with my wife. She really struggled with that movie. And I had, it was the most authentic thing I'd seen to display what was going on for those of us in that time. So that one really resonated with me.
I've not watched Warfare because of that reason. A couple of my brother's friends, they were just like, it's the most accurate depiction of what we went through. And I said, should I watch it? And they were all like, no, we don't think you should.
Yeah,
so
it's no joke.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're the type of person that probably could at some point. For me, it was surreal. It was SEALs from a platoon and had Anglican Marines. So it was like, okay, that's my guy.
Yeah.
That's our guy. It was absolutely, it really hit home. And so,
I haven't found one person who's been in Iraq or Afghanistan who didn't have that same reaction to that film. Yeah.
It's no joke. It's legit.
What past Marine has inspired you the most? Like when you think back to, we're 250 years coming up for our proud Marine Corps. Who's the Marine that you think of that's like, that's my guy?
I can't. I wish I. It's almost unfair that you have to say I have to name one because there's 100 names popping to mind. I'll say a name that won't mean anything to anybody but him if he ever hears it. His name is Aaron Irvin. Aaron Irvin was a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps when I was in high school, right around this whole Top Gun time. I, at 15 and a half, got my worker's permit, started working at Target, and he worked there as a part-time weekend job, and he was a Marine. And he's the one that made me realize that I could be a Marine too. Because I had put Marines on this pedestal, this unattainable, superhuman, bigger, stronger, faster. And I was a skinny late bloomer, not a big, tough kid. And he knew I wanted to be a Marine, but I think I was always like, I could never do that. I could never do that. I could never do that. The Marine Corps was just, it was just not, didn't, he is what made her, my mom gave me great advice. And we talked about that earlier. He was a real Marine that was like, hey, you can do this. And he explained and showed me how it could become real. Had I not met him at that time at 15, 16 years old, when I wanted to be a Marine, no question about it. But there's this part in the back of my mind, I'm like, you can't do this.
Yeah, the doubt.
He made it real. Had I not met him and had that influence, the entire trajectory of my life is different.
Do you still
Aaron
talk?
Irvin.
Do you have contact? Where's
I do. I 100% do. He was on Facebook, and
Love it.
he was at my OCS graduations. He's at my commissioning. This is someone I still stay in touch with. Aaron on Facebook, 100%.
Love it. I have to ask you this question because I asked Jocko, and this clip that we put out had millions and millions of views. So I asked Jocko what his top parenting tip was.
Oh God. Also,
and you can't say listen. You can't say listen.
No, I won't say that. I mean, we've beat that one, and we know that's true. And I will say something. I didn't see what he said. I don't know what he said. I have a sense of maybe what it is. I think for me, what I have learned as a parent, and there's a little cliche here, is I try to let them do what they want as much as humanly possible. And what the lesson was like, my kids are going to be what they want to be, not what I want them to be. And as I look at that, I'm like, man, any influence I exert on them that comes from my ego, my selfishness, my desires is not going to work. And I have to trust that my wife and I have created this framework of a family with love and respect and discipline and hard work and all those things. And the framework is all you can do is give them the framework. And beyond that, you got to let them be for themselves what they want to be. And man, that is really hard because you see them doing things like, that's dumb, you shouldn't do that, that's a mistake. And I have all this wisdom and knowledge. And every time I try to impose it on them, it's met with resistance. And so I have to just, I know this maybe is the silly, you have to trust your kids. And the way you trust your kids is you create an environment where the opportunity to succeed sits inside there and they choose for themselves how they want to handle that, and just trust that they will do the right thing because the example you set, the framework that you built is strong enough to help them. But you start trying to control your kids and influence your kids in ways that's for you, not for them, and you're going to run into problems.
I feel like God, your answers are eerily similar. I'll put it that way.
I'll have to go see this. Is that on YouTube or something?
It's on Instagram. I'll shoot it over to you. But
Send
it was
me.
like literally one, and it wasn't because it was, well, obviously it's because it's Jocko, but like
Totally.
it was that bit of advice. And he kind of laughed when I asked him. I was like, your top parenting tip, and he kind of went down but very, very similar response to that. And it's so true. And, I've had these conversations with people a lot just around parenting and your children and understanding that all of your kids are going to be so different. I've got a 19-year-old. I also have a 17-year-old in high school, and people are like, oh, is she going to the Naval Academy? And I'm like, she has zero interest in the Naval Academy. Literally, I tell the story that when my daughter found out she was going to Navy, she was recruited there for lacrosse. And when she got the phone call from the lacrosse coach, and she committed there, we're crying, we're so happy, we're hugging. And her sister gave her a hug and said, I'm so proud of you, Maggie. And then literally looked at her father and I and said, just so you know, I'm never going to the Naval Academy. Like, she wanted us to know, like, that is not my trajectory. And yeah, you know, you got to let your kids forge their own path for sure. And hope you gave them all the tools in the toolkit.
Yes.
Yeah. As we close out, you can see I have so many little fold downs, but there was one thing, and I don't want to share too much about the end of your book. You tell a really tremendous story. It's a sad story. It hit me, but the one line, other than your mom's line, which again I'm going to use over and over again, the one line that hit me so hard is that the best leadership outlasts the leader.
Yeah.
And you need to prepare your team to outlast you. And that's in anything in life. And that was brilliant.
Well, Jamie Cochran, and I know you know Jamie, she and I work really closely together. It's a lesson that we started to understand. And in those chapters, there's a tough chapter, in that chapter I write about my daughter, and I write about a story about a client, and those are hard stories. Those are tough stories to tell. And what I recognized was something, and Jamie said it in a way that just hit me, and it stayed with me, is that good leadership outlasts the leader. Yeah. And that's kind of what you need to be doing right now. Yeah. Whoever you are listening and watching this, what you do and what you put into this world, it's going to outlast you. And it's easy to overlook the importance of that because we don't pay attention to time all that often, but that stayed with me, and I'm glad that resonated. And I think it's true and something that's very easily overlooked. And I know in my career, I did not pay attention to that the way that I should have because I just didn't think it in those terms. So I had to get it in there. I got to give Jamie full credit for helping us understand how important that is. And obviously the story kind of tells itself. It's a heartbreaking story, had to be told, but it's an important lesson.
Well, it really resonated. The whole book resonated. The Need to Lead comes out on October 21st. And like you said in the book, you want to be a good leader, you got to practice being a good leader. How do you practice being a good leader? Read good books about leadership. This is one of them. I'm really excited for everybody to get their hands on this. Dave, it was awesome to finally meet you. You're everything I expected. And I'm just super excited for this to come out and for everybody to start applying these leadership principles into their lives. Thank you so much.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Awesome.